Now, we've spoken about the box office disaster that is Disney's Snow White, and the lead actress's delusions of grandeur are not helping. Here she compares herself to a priceless piece of art, the Winged Victory.
I'll quickly mention this. The son of Snow White producer Mark Platt, Jonah Platt is the son's name. He is speaking out publicly against RachelZegler and blaming her for the film's catastrophic failure at the box office.
RachelZegler, like so many kids raised on TikTok, she's all for infantada is the only global solution.
RachelZegler, she's an...
Or what?
They're leaning into woke. Hardcore.
They're petrified of some kind of backlash.
If it ain't broken, don't fix it. Leave it the alone.
So she comes off as an insufferable, whiny brat.
Of course, like with everything on the left these days, they just take it too far. It just doesn't make any sense.
It makes a little bit more sense.
You can gaslight people so easily.
Yes. The new Disney boss babe, who is RachelZegler, the inverse of happy.
Nobody wants a movie about true love? What kind of woman do we want out there seeking true love, Eliana? The outrage.
Snow White is officially Disney's biggest box office disaster of all time. And with the second weekend rolling in now as we speak, the train wreck is only getting worse and worse for Disney. And as you can see here, it has only just barely started to make over $100 million in the worldwide box office. This movie is going to be losing Disney hundreds of millions of dollars, and they deserve every bit of loss they get from this film. And as we saw last weekend with the first weekend for Snow White, RachelZegler was coping real hard. She, of course, was saying things like on Instagram like, "Thank you so much for making this the #1 movie in the world, guys."
RachelZegler thought she could silence the noise, but instead she ignited an inferno. In a now viral video, filmed in what appeared to be the quiet sanctuary of her bedroom, she sat before the camera, her expression a storm of conflicting emotions. Frustration burned in her gaze, lips pressed tightly together as if holding back an onslaught of words. There was defiance in the way she squared her shoulders, exhaustion in the heaviness of her voice, and perhaps, just for a fleeting moment, a trace of desperation in the way she searched for the right words. The backlash against her had been relentless. Every comment, every headline, every dissected interview had snowballed into an avalanche of criticism. And yet, as she spoke, she clung to a singular truth. People still showed up. Her supporters, she insisted, remained steadfast. They lined up for her movies, they believed in her talent, and no amount of online vitriol could erase that. But her voice wavered, caught somewhere between vulnerability and defiance. One moment, she seemed on the verge of tears. The next, her words sharpened, slicing through the criticism with a quiet fury. She wasn't just defending herself, she was fighting to reclaim her narrative.
And to everyone who hates when I win, the Winged Victory came to the Louvre in pieces, and people still line up to see her. And I can only hope that despite my flaws, and despite my cracks and my breaks, and there are many of them, that at every premiere and everything I do, people will wait in line to see.
She spoke with the confidence of someone determined to reclaim her narrative. But the internet had other plans. Within minutes, clips from the video spread like wildfire. TikTokers pounced, slicing it apart with reactions ranging from sarcastic eye rolls to full-blown parody skits. Some edited her words out of context, making her sound defensive or dismissive. Others exaggerated her expressions, turning an emotional plea into a viral joke. No matter how it was framed, one thing was clear. Rachel had lost control of the conversation. Meanwhile, X, formerly Twitter, descended into chaos. Hashtags exploded and users flooded the platform with memes and biting commentary.
Its narrative was cowardly. It was just awful.
The movie is doing catastrophically. They spent $300 million, and it currently has a 2.2 out of 10 rating on IMDb.
Screenshots of her expressions were turned into reaction images. Every sentence she spoke was analyzed, criticized, and mocked. Instead of shifting public opinion in her favor, she had unknowingly handed critics more fuel. What was meant to be a moment of redemption became yet another controversy. Instead of gaining sympathy, Rachel faced a fresh wave of ridicule. Some saw her video as an attempt to guilt-trip audiences into supporting her work, while others dismissed it as a desperate attempt to control the backlash. Her attempt to push back only amplified the outrage. The more she fought against it, the worse it became. In today's digital world, once the internet turns against you, reclaiming control is nearly impossible. The hashtag said it all. Snowflop. What should have been a heartfelt defense was seen as tone-deaf, self-centered, and completely out of touch with how the film had been received. But for many, this wasn't a shock. They had been waiting for this moment. Some were even celebrating it. Screenshots of review bombs flooded social media. Meme threads mocked her past statements about not needing a prince. Old interview clips, ripped out of context.
I'm a narcissist. The original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so.
Okay.
There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
Yeah.
Weird. And then it became like, I will elbow everyone out of the way to play the part. That people will assume is a love story just because like we cast a guy in the movie, right. Andrew Burnap. All of Andrew's scenes could get cut. Who knows? It's Hollywood, baby.
I say, if I'm going to stand there 18 hours in a dress of an iconic Disney princess, I deserve to be paid for every hour that it is streamed online.
And we absolutely wrote a Snow White that is
not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be.
Resurfaced like clockwork, painting. Her as dismissive of the 1937 Snow White, calling it weird and creepy. What was meant to be a fairy tale comeback had turned into a full-blown digital witch trial. And in the eyes of the internet, the villain wasn't the evil queen. It was Rachel herself. But this backlash wasn't just online noise, it was reflected in hard, cold numbers. Snow White opened to a staggeringly weak $45 million at the domestic box office. For a Disney live-action remake, one carrying the weight of the company's very first animated classic, that number was disastrous. The comparison was brutal. Even The Little Mermaid, which had faced its own share of controversy, had soared, past $95 million in its opening weekend. Box office analysts were stunned. Some called it Disney's biggest miscalculation in years. Others didn't sugarcoat it. They labeled it a flop. And the fallout was swift. Major theater chains quietly pulled the film from their biggest screens, replacing it with higher-performing titles. Within just the second week, some locations had dropped it entirely. For a studio like Disney, known for dominating the theatrical market, this was uncharted territory. And for Rachel, it was a public unraveling, even Disney's powerhouse marketing. Machine couldn't turn the tide. Audiences had already made up their minds. Then came the Oscars.
Please welcome RachelZegler and Gal Gadot.
Visual effects push the boundaries of what we see on screen.
Their work makes the impossible seem possible.
With breathtaking ambition, they create magic that wraps its arms around our wildest imaginations.
Here are the nominees for Best Visual Effects.
While Rachel wasn't nominated for any awards, she still made an appearance, a moment that should have been a chance for damage control. Instead, it became another internet spectacle. Every step she took down the red carpet, every expression she made, was dissected in real time. Social media users picked apart her outfit, her body language, her presence itself. The whispers grew, louder. Had Hollywood already moved on from RachelZegler? RachelZegler's Snow White was supposed to be a new beginning. Instead, it became the role that defined her in the worst way possible.
It's fair to say that no one on the right side of America can stand the star of this movie. And yet, Christian, you've seen the movie, and it appears that the filmmakers cobbled together enough salvageable material to make the movie itself quite nice.
Yeah, it's not a train wreck. I was expecting just that. And listen, it's not a great film. It's got its flaws. And this third act is completely rewritten to be more empowering. I think you know the drill. But listen, one of the reasons why RachelZegler sticks around is she's got a beautiful voice and she has some talent. So I think that certainly helps her because she's a PR nightmare. I don't know how anyone would hire her, but again, there is some talent there. It is a familiar story. I think kids will enjoy it. There are a couple of little scary moments, but nothing that much. But given all the behind-the-scenes mayhem.
And in Hollywood, where reputation is everything, a single misstep can be the difference between superstardom and obscurity. But how did it all unravel so quickly? The warning signs were there long before the film's release. Every interview, every public appearance, and every offhand comment slowly chipped away at the goodwill she had built from West Side Story. At first, it was subtle. Fans side-eyed her dismissive remarks about the original Snow White, but many chalked it up to youthful confidence. However, as the press tour went on, the narrative shifted. Her words no longer came across as a fresh, modern take on a beloved classic. Instead, they sounded arrogant, dismissive, and, to some, outright disrespectful. And then came the viral clips. Rachel's past statements resurfaced like ghosts she couldn't shake off.
I'm a narcissist. The original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so.
Okay.
There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
Yeah.
Weird. And then it became like, I will elbow everyone out of the way to play the part. That people will assume is a love story just because like we cast a guy in the movie, right. Andrew Burnap. All of Andrew's scenes could get cut. Who knows? It's Hollywood, baby.
I say, if I'm gonna stand there 18 hours in a dress of an iconic Disney princess, I deserve to be paid for every hour that it is streamed on.
Her now infamous eye roll when discussing the 1937 film, her sarcastic tone when mentioning the prince, and her insistence that her Snow White wouldn't be saved by a man were replayed endlessly across social media. At a time when audiences were growing increasingly frustrated with Hollywood's reimagining of classic films, her words felt like gasoline on an already burning fire. The backlash wasn't just about Snow White anymore, it was about something bigger. Rachel became a symbol of everything fans disliked about modern Hollywood. To one side, she represented the industry's dismissive attitude toward beloved stories, replacing timeless themes with forced modern messaging. To the other, she was the embodiment of unchecked celebrity ego, someone who seemed ungrateful for the opportunity she had been given, and then the numbers came in. Snow White opened to a disastrous $45 million at the domestic box office. For Disney, a company known for turning animated classics into billion-dollar live-action hits, this was a catastrophe. The film was expected to be a cultural moment, but instead, it flopped harder than anyone anticipated. Comparisons were brutal. Even The Little Mermaid, which had faced its own share of backlash, opened with over $95 million. Analysts were stunned. Disney executives were reportedly scrambling for explanations. Theater chains quietly reduced Snow White's screenings, replacing it with higher-grossing films. Within weeks, it was clear. The movie wasn't just underperforming, it was a full-blown failure. And Rachel? She bore the brunt of it. Her Oscars appearance, meant to serve as damage control, only made things worse. Standing beside her Snow White co-star, Gal Gadot, Rachel looked visibly tense. Observers quickly noted the awkward distance between them. Gal, a Hollywood veteran, seemed to be carefully navigating the controversy, maintaining professionalism while subtly distancing herself from Rachel. The internet wasted no time dissecting the footage. Body language experts broke down their interactions. Twitter threads speculated on behind-the-scenes tensions. Industry insiders whispered that Gal's career remained unscathed while Rachel's future was in freefall, and that's when the real consequences began. The roles that were once lined up for Rachel started slipping away. Casting rumors dried up. Publicists worked overtime to reframe the narrative, pitching redemption arcs, soft press interviews, and controlled appearances. But the damage was done. The problem wasn't just Rachel's words, it was her refusal to acknowledge the backlash. Rather than a heartfelt apology or a moment of self-awareness, she doubled down. Her social media presence remained defiant, her tone unwavering. And in Hollywood, where perception is everything, that stubbornness can be career-ending. Some actors recover from controversy. They charm their way back, take a break, or find a way to reconnect with audiences. But Rachel's path to redemption is unclear. Will she learn from this, or will Snow White remain the role that changed everything for the worse? Only time will tell. RachelZegler's Hollywood trajectory was supposed to be unstoppable, a Spielberg discovery, a Golden Globe winner, a young actress positioned to take over the industry. But in a matter of months, that momentum crumbled, and now she finds herself at the center of one of the most brutal public downfalls in recent memory.
That despite my flaws, and despite my cracks and my breaks, and there are many of them, that at every premiere and everything I do, people will wait in line to see.
What went wrong? It wasn't just Snow White's failure at the box office. It wasn't just the controversy surrounding her comments about the original 1937 film.
Now, we've spoken about the box office disaster that is Disney's Snow White, and the lead actress's delusions of grandeur are not helping.
It was the way she handled it all. The interviews, the social media posts, the defiance in the face of growing backlash. At first, her comments about Snow White were brushed off as a young actress trying to modernize a classic story. But as more interviews surfaced, the tone shifted. Rachel wasn't just distancing herself from the original film, she was mocking it. Clips of her rolling her eyes at the idea of a prince, dismissing the romance, and calling the story outdated, spread like wildfire. Fans didn't see her as a fresh, bold voice. They saw her as ungrateful. Then came the viral meltdown. Attempting to defend herself, Rachel recorded an emotional video that only made things worse. Her frustration was palpable, but rather than winning people over, she reinforced the image her critics had been painting: arrogant, dismissive, and completely unaware of the damage she had done to her own reputation. Instead of silencing the backlash, she fueled it. And when the box office numbers came in, the internet pounced. A $45 million domestic opening for Snow White was nothing short of a disaster. By comparison, even The Little Mermaid, which faced its own share of backlash, had nearly doubled that number on opening weekend. Disney, known for dominating the live-action remake space, had just suffered one of its biggest failures. For Rachel, the fallout was immediate. Even neutral viewers began to turn on her, dissecting her every move. Comment sections were flooded with words like smug, entitled, and out of touch. Unlike other stars who navigate public backlash with support from industry peers, Rachel found herself completely alone. No co-stars defended her, no directors spoke out, no fellow actresses rallied behind her. The silence was deafening, and in Hollywood, silence translates to real consequences. Reports surfaced that Rachel's upcoming projects were being quietly reconsidered. High-profile roles that once seemed like a sure thing were now slipping away. Studios, marketing teams, and producers were asking the toughest question in the industry: is she still bankable? The answer wasn't looking good. To some, Rachel had become the face of everything wrong with Hollywood's approach to reboots and modernized classics. To others, she was a cautionary tale of unchecked celebrity ego. The numbers didn't lie. Audiences weren't just rejecting the movie, they were rejecting her. And yet, instead of acknowledging the backlash and attempting to course correct, she doubled down. Her social media presence remained defiant. She continued lashing out, refusing to engage with the criticism in a way that could have softened her image. Hollywood has seen actors recover from massive failures before, but only those who knew when to apologize, when to step back, and when to win back public favor. So far, Rachel has done none of that. Her Oscars appearance, meant to be a moment of redemption, only made things worse. Standing next to her Snow White co-star, Gal Gadot, Rachel looked tense. Gal, meanwhile, exuded professionalism, smiling for cameras, engaging with the press, and subtly distancing herself from the controversy. Body language experts picked apart every moment. Twitter threads exploded with speculation about behind-the-scenes tension. Insiders later confirmed it. Gal had been contractually obligated to promote the film, but beyond that, she wanted nothing to do with it. Unlike Rachel, Gal's career remained untarnished. The contrast was brutal. While Gal continued booking roles and landing brand deals, Rachel found herself increasingly isolated. She had become synonymous with Snow White's failure, not just as a film, but as a cultural moment. Her team is now in full damage control mode, scrambling to pitch redemption arc interviews, positive press coverage, and controlled public appearances. But in the digital age, viral clips don't disappear. Once public perception turns sour, it's nearly impossible to reverse. Some industry insiders are already making their predictions. RachelZegler, once set to be Disney's next major star, may now be remembered for one of the most spectacular career misfires in recent history, not just because of Snow White's failure, but because of how she handled it when the spotlight was at its brightest.